Thanks so much. It's a delight to be here and to have the opportunity to add the third sector to the series of DAM Industry Week. It's always interesting as we have the opportunity to look at sector-specific requirements and needs within digital asset management. Healthcare has such a broad swath of meanings. The operational needs within pharma, within the biomedical world of device creation and device testing, the needs in large to small direct service providers, whether it's something here in the States, such as the Mayo Clinic or the Cleveland Clinic, where there's marketing assets that can rival any kind of CPG and retail operations. And there's also, of course, the need for, well, where's our housekeeping guide? Something we might find if we were working with Hilton Hotels or one of the other hospitality chains. And I so enjoy the diversity of requirements and the different meanings of what is a digital asset in the healthcare sector. We also have, of course, a series of more pronounced needs about privacy. If a particular pharmacological drug or a device is being tested, there are many assets that derive from that. In addition, there's clinical education that has to occur. Sometimes there's patient testimonials, and the surrounding privacy rights in Europe and in the US and elsewhere are considerable and have to become central to DAM operating efficiently. But in any and all cases, digital asset management continues to play an ever more central role as an enterprise application that departments, divisions, subsidiaries, whatever the case might be, contribute to and use as they go to work every day. Today, our focus will be on healthcare, and I'm going to be introducing our first speaker here shortly. As we welcome you to DAM for Healthcare as part of the Industry Week, I'd like to thank all of you who are attending from around the world. It is always fun, and many of you know I like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're calling in from. We'd like to thank our sponsors who help make this event possible. Please do visit them throughout the conference via the exhibition tab to learn more. We're all pretty good at this virtual conference thing at this point. So during the sessions, we encourage you to chat with fellow attendees and, of course, make the most of our expert speaker lineup by submitting your questions in the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of the screen. Periodically, you'll see me look over to the right because that's where I have another computer that's set up for me to keep an eye on chat, and also so that I can interleave your questions with our speakers who have volunteered their time getting ready for this event today and during the day today. You can also use the chat tab to get the conversation going, and of course, navigate to the lounge tab where you can participate in real-time networking with industry peers. If at any point during the event you need assistance from the Henry Stewart team, I don't work with any other group who's more willing, able, and engaged to say, how can I help? Just use the chat bot on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, and they'll do whatever they can to help you out with any question or production issues. I hope that I'll be seeing some of you, if by any chance any of you are attending Henry Stewart Creative Operations in New York next month, an in-person event. And of course, we have DAM events coming up in London in June and in New York City in September. And it'll be a delight to welcome the community to be together in 3D instead of just here in 2D on our cameras. So let's move on to the show. I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker, Huw Jenkins from Astellas Pharma Europe Ltd, as he takes us through creating compliant customer experiences at scale. Huw and I are going to take advantage of our time together, and we hope you'll take advantage of his expertise as I am going to talk about a fascinating project that affirms much of what many of us, including Huw and me, have been working on for a long time to see the wider boundaries, the greater definition and enablement of DAM being part of the central thesis of omnichannel marketing. And we're going to have a chance to ask you to talk about this for a bit. You and I have been working on some questions. We welcome yours. Huw, thanks so much for joining us. I've really enjoyed the chance to spend time with you over the last few weeks as we've been getting ready for today. And I'd welcome the opportunity to have you share, as I've been privileged to know for a few years, a bit about your background and what in the world was DAM when you were in your career, and you probably didn't study this in graduate school. And tell us how you got involved and a little bit of the journey and then what you do today.
Yeah, thank you, David, and thanks for the warm welcome. I'm honored to be part of this kind of quite prestigious event, I think, for Henry Stewart in relation to DAM. It's always been a sort of an event that I've been very familiar with, throughout the years. Yeah, so it's an interesting place for me. I mean, today I'm not calling from my garage, as appearances may seem. I'm actually in one of our agency offices, quite a trendy place in central London, and it's kind of nice to be. Partners are such a big part of making DAM happen. But anyway, I digress. But to answer your question, David, it's been quite a pivot for me over the years. I didn't start my journey in pharma. I actually started my journey in the music industry. So yeah, as I first left university, I joined a small record label, and as what at the time was known as new media marketing manager. I guess today it would just be marketing. And it was really focused on, like, how do we kind of leverage this new thing called the internet. Back in 1999, we didn't even have a website. But I was responsible for, like, think about new strategies to help promote, albums online. I think I was the first person actually to launch a viral online game to promote an album, which eventually went to #1. So those were really exciting times. Then I kind of spent, after being there for a while, I moved into the more sort of technology area around creative industries. So looking at how different kind of creative agencies worked with technology to help them achieve what they needed to do. Spent probably around 10 years in that kind of sphere, and then ended up working for an agency in content production. So they specialize in kind of localization and reusing content. And that's where I first started to intersect with DAM, because ultimately you can't reuse what you don't own. And if you don't have the right DAM in place, then you can't really facilitate the requirements that you have for content production and localization, which really led to me to kind of specialize in the DAM space, really thinking about how the technology makes meaningful change across, the way people kind of talk to their customers and create content that is kind of valuable and meaningful across different markets and territories. So I spent a long time in the production space, understanding that the need for DAM, and understanding also the production workflows that would underpin that, before I moved to a technology company in the pharma space that focused on something very specific to the pharma area, which is known as a medical legal regulatory approval. And that's ensuring that the materials that we create are compliant. And we can talk a little bit more about that later on. But what they really need to do is help thinking about how that relates to their DAM strategy moving forward. So that was an exciting place for me to actually implement a digital asset management strategy for a technology company from the ground up, which led to me where I am today, responsible for omnichannel content strategy for Astellas Pharma in Europe, which is where I've been for the last year or so. And it's been exciting to be able to deliver the things that I've been talking so much about over the last 7 or so years. So I'm very happy to be, I'm very excited to be doing things.
Yeah, what an interesting kind of culmination and unfolding. And I love the idea of thinking of something being called new media in 1999.
Yeah.
And then the meaning of that same exact word in 2009, 2019, and 5 will get you 10, that in 2029, there'll be another meaning of the word new media. And one of the things that all of us who are here today enable is expressing how digital asset management is such a vital piece of infrastructure to be ready for the changing meanings of new media. And it's part of the recurring, I guess it's one of those things, if I could make like little fortune cookies for executives all over the world, I'd have them crack it open and say, you must have DAM to be ready for new media.
Yeah.
So, one of David's pipe
Right.
dreams.
Yeah. I
Anyway,
mean, you
so yeah, one of the
go on,
things
David.
that I'd like to start with, tell us a little bit about the company. You know, there's high fluency in certain people who have joined us today, and I can tell by even the early chat who are familiar with it. Others may be arriving from biomedical manufacturing companies, from direct service providers. Tell us a little bit about the place that you work now.
So I work for Astellas Pharma. Astellas are a top 20 pharma company with a focus on oncology and urology. So we focus on, creating, not creating, we focus on products that help patients with kind of various forms of cancer. So it's quite, a serious topic that we take very seriously in ensuring that the philosophy of what we do really has the, improving patients' lives at the heart of every decision that we make. So it's, it sounds kind of cynical, and I think sometimes pharma gets a bit of a bad rep in the papers, but there is a genuine desire across, from my colleagues and a lot of pharma companies as well, to really improve the life of patients, and that's really what we are focused on doing. But Astellas itself, I think I've mentioned before, we're a Japanese company, and I work predominantly in the UK, although I have a global role in the organization.
Mm-hmm. And let's transition from that global role in the organization. That's a large remit, and the remit that you've got and the opportunity that you're cultivating and bringing into being is about exploring what the meaning of omnichannel,
Yeah.
great word. And we are in an era right now, I think, that's so exciting because we are beginning to be able to think about creative operations as a platform, DAM being a facet of that, omnichannel as being platform enabled, and you're very much in the center of driving some of this. What does omnichannel mean for pharma, and how in the world, in confronting an opportunity to make that develop meaning, have you had the chance to explore and express that around the company?
Oh, it's such a great question. I think that, talking earlier about things like new media marketing, it felt like kind of buzzwordy back in 99. And I think today, even the word omnichannel has a sense of, just kind of a lack of real meaning and substance. So, at Astellas, we created a definition. I'll read it to you, actually. So our official definition of omnichannel is this: omnichannel at Astellas is a personalized and seamless experience powered by data that connects all physical and digital engagements for patients, providers, and payers. Well, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but this still can feel a little bit lofty. But really, I think that omnichannel, to me, is about being consistent across all channels. And if you think about where pharma traditionally has come from, so in the past, we've been very much focused on promotions supported via our sales rep. So a sales rep sitting in front of a doctor and talking about a drug. I think as we kind of times evolved, we're currently in a multi-channel world where we create content that's for optimal experiences across different channels. In pharma, they're very specific channels, which would be, typically around kind of an iPad and how you would engage with a physician across a detail aid, or how you might create an email to support the post-call activities from the rep. And it's very much based on creating content for these specific experiences. But the challenge with that is that the messaging and that experience can start to get really disconnected and confusing for our customers. And what that means, how that transpires to that statement I made earlier about value for patients. Because if we're not clear and consistent in the way that we talk to and help educate our HCPs, healthcare professionals, our physicians and our doctors about the benefits our products give to their patients, then we lose an opportunity to help extend the life of the patient or improve the life of the patient. So it's really important that we're clear and we communicate well with our customers. And so omnichannel allows us to think more consistently and be more orchestrated about the way we communicate with our customers. And it has a real opportunity to help us think differently about the kind of content that we create.
I'd like you to reread that definition and then talk about, where did that come from? because the chance to kind of develop a banner, develop a moniker, even something as simple as a moniker, where we've heard some great names for, the bucket, Kentucky Fried Chicken's name for DAM. But this is a much greater kind of gathering point. I'd like you to reread that and then share with us, okay, how'd you get there and how's it been received?
So I'll reread the statement to you. Omnichannel at Astellas is a personalized and seamless experience powered by data that connects all physical and digital engagements for patients, providers, and payers. How do we get here? We saw the need for us as a company to change the way that we operate. And there's a reason for that, and that reason is driven by the fact that in today's world, if we don't do anything, we just end up saying the same thing to the same person every single time. And that's not very helpful when you're bombarding people with the same message all the time in a very unidirectional approach. So omnichannel means that, so that need to be able to communicate consistently came from the fact that we realized that we weren't being competitive and that we had to change to be competitive in a digital world. Because essentially, what we need to do is to reduce the sales cycle that we have with our customers. So today it can be, a number of, continuing visits from a sales rep, which is an expensive process in itself, if not something that can be quite lengthy. But we could reduce that sales cycle by ensuring that that engagement is augmented and contributed with other digital information. So ensuring that the information that the doctor reads on our website after the visit from our representatives is consistent to the experience that he just had. And that the email that is sent to him afterwards to kind of follow up with more information, again, has some consistency and orchestration in that experience. So omnichannel came from that need for us to be able to get our information to our customers faster so we can help contribute to our values in the way that we need to help the lives of our patients.
It's so interesting to set kind of a circular context or an interactive context between the value proposition, the desired end goal, and then the technologies that you're helping to oversee to enable this. And one of the things that you mentioned both in your opening introduction, thinking about part of the discourse and pattern in your career, and that many of us are involved with thinking about. You mentioned the word searching and helping people to find what they were, having websites, et cetera, being able to find things. So in this case, part of this must have been searching for, well, where are those ROIs? Where are those things that rose, kind of percolated or bubbled up to the top? I should do something about it, like a laboratory and a beacon, right? So yeah, what percolated? How did you search for ROI to
it's
get this going?
Such a big thing, isn't it, ROI? Because we've got ROI that are very operationally driven things. Because we understand that if we don't want to say the same thing to everyone all the time, we've got to produce more content. And producing more content, well, that could mean that we have to increase budgets exponentially. Well, that's not going to happen. So therefore, we have to really rethink our operating model. And this comes to the title of the presentation today about creating creative content at scale, compliant content at scale, because an omni-channel marketing approach requires a much higher volume of content when they're used to. We've got multiple channels, new formats, higher frequency, new customer types, and more importantly, more attitudinal segments. So within those kind of different customer types, be they kind of physicians, specialists, oncologists, we also have to consider that in all of those different segments, we have different personas. There'll be physicians who are more led by data or more led by quality of life. So how do we create the right kind of messaging for them? Ultimately, it means that we'd have to create more content. So the way that we figure out how to make this successful is that we move away from channel specific content to something called modular content. I mean, that's like creating small building blocks of content that we can use to create more stuff. Pre-approving this so that we do a number of things. And this has come back to the ROI piece. Firstly, we need to reuse more. If we want to create more with less, we can't keep recreating the same thing over and over again. So the DAM is central to that whole reuse part, because that's where we're going to store things. I'll talk a little bit about, I think, how the DAM is evolving, not just to be a place that you store files, but also start to think about things like claims and the text attributes. But perhaps we can go there later, otherwise I'll just go down another rabbit hole. So reuse of materials is really important for us. But we also need to reduce the time of approval, because approval in life sciences takes a long, long time. You know, so an email could take, I think in the industry average is something like 21 days. And it's because you have to substantiate all of the claims that you make. The MLR, medical, legal, regulatory approval process, is extremely robust, and for good reason. I mean, we can't just say anything we want to help influence our customers. We have to ensure that the right rigor and balance is there to say the right thing to the right person at the right time. And so ROI has operational benefits, like the ones I kind of talked about: reuse, reducing speed, things that we can measure. Also consistency, things that we can measure to sort of ensuring that we're achieving objectives around omni-channel ways of working. But aside from ROI, there's kind of softer areas of that, because if we make if the DAM becomes a central experience to make the lives of our internal stakeholders better, because if marketers are, you know, find it easier to find content and reuse it, if they're finding it, if our approvers are able to be more efficient about the time they spend in the approval process and not having to reapprove the same thing over and over again, you know, they're going to be happier. And we create Astellas as a better environment for our stakeholders to work in. And I think that's a really exciting prospect. Like, how do we make Astellas be a leader in innovation and a leader in the way that we actually think about the way content's created and care about the way our internal stakeholders are engaging around, you know, the technology that they use to manage their content. So there's ROI around kind of operational efficiencies, around reuse and speed. There's ROI around kind of how do we make Astellas a better place to work. And then there's ROI, which we're kind of thinking about later on, like how do we actually measure or not, whether different modules have been helpful in terms of, you know, customer engagement. And, you know, that's something which has a little bit more complexity around it, but like, you know, we're definitely going to get there. And these things kind of really help kind of motivate me also as an individual to do exciting things to help move us forward. Yeah.
And I think I like tugging at the edges of ROI, and sometimes I have used the phrase, we have return on investment, very traditional, and then we have return on impact or return on initiative. And there's a little more elasticity, as you were just saying, in some of the value propositions of what this brings. Now you've made me think I have to come up with another I word, because I've had return on investment, return on impact, return on information, which I think is another something I learned from the Gartner book on infonomics and the value of information that's embedded in these systems, DAM, and in the adjacencies. But I also think digital, creating an attractive work environment, a stimulating work environment, where there's so little unemployment in many of these, in many of the worlds that we work in and we work close to, and having an attractiveness to the technology and to the innovations that are at work. Something about reducing voluntary attrition. And I want DAM to do that. I want DAM to be part of making work interesting.
Yeah.
That these kinds of projects attract top talent and retain top talent. As you've been looking at that, and tell us a little bit about the team that you work with, and let's talk a little bit more about some of the meanings of how compliant content, some of the hurdles that you've had to overcome in bringing that to scale and changing content's operating model within the company.
Well, it's interesting because you know, recently we've had a new SVP join and I met him just yesterday, and everyone was introducing what they do and what their roles are and who they work with. And when it came around to me, I was like, you know, I actually work with everybody. And they're like, yeah, that's true. You do work with everybody. So for me, it's like I have a broad set of stakeholders that I work with, you know, around, I have to ensure that our global teams are motivated, because everyone has different motivations. Like I can't, provide the same motivations to our local teams as our global teams. When I say teams, I mean our brand teams. So our global brand teams are kind of motivated by kind of how do they get better adoption of their strategic messages, and how can they better measure its impact? Are the things that I'm creating actually resonating and working? Local teams are a little bit more operational because they're utilizing, well, supposedly utilizing this strategy to impact their market. So they want like operational things, faster approvals, more insights, and be able to respond to their customer needs. Our approval teams, our MLR teams, medical, legal, and regulatory teams, they want to be more efficient use of their resources, avoiding the idea of scrutinizing the same thing over and over again. How can they be more efficient in the approval? Our agency is also needs motivation, because this is a paradigm shift in the way everybody works. They're kind of, how can they focus less on creating high volumes and tactics? I mean, yeah, okay, maybe that's a cash cow in some instances, but really it should be about how can they be better partners with us? How can they spend more time on kind of integrated messaging, customer experience, rather than just creating high volumes of content? Now, production teams, our content factory, as we call them, they get to benefit from, more accurate briefing, faster kind of production output, because we standardize the way that we create content around these sort of content modules. And even our exec teams have benefits. Right? I think modular content allows us to sort of deconstruct the way that we are building content and make it more measurable. Ensure like, so you can start to measure how effective your strategy has been under particular communication objectives, or look at different messaging considerations, how they're resonating. So exec teams get to measure things like, how we, we have targets around, increasing reuse, which has, direct correlation to cost savings. So they get to sort of see the overview of, how we're performing strategically. So we have a lot of, this kind of broad sort of stakeholder benefits that we talk about, and it's just ensuring that we take people with us, because the paradigm shift and the change management that comes with omnichannel, that comes to the modular content, is so enormous that I don't want to overwhelm people. So really focusing on what's going to benefit them.
And I think
to
that
answer your question, David, I'm not sure if I did, but let me know if I need more clarification there.
I will. And also that's a good reminder to both of us, Huw, that we welcome questions from those of you who are joining us today. Just put them in the chat panel, and I'm kind of glancing over to my right to see when questions do come in. We welcome them. Please send them along at any time. We don't have a particular breakpoint in this session plan for, okay, now it's time for questions. I think the horizon of reporting that you just outlined a bit for what executives are interested in, what operational lines are interested in, is an area of unfolding development in digital asset management. And the importance to remember to journal our successes along the way, or lack of successes, where we need to say, did we really hit that ROI? How did it work? And one of the things you mentioned in talking about where you're sitting today with the tool set behind you, is that at an agency's office, did you say?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
No. And what is the role, what will be the role of the agencies in this very phase-shifted approach to thinking quite differently about content and its accessibility in campaigns?
Well, I think the role of the agency is definitely changing. And especially in life sciences, sometimes I think we're a little bit slow to adapt some things, but the agency is a broad term, because like there's agency of record, like the guys that come up with the strategy and the campaign. Then there's our production agencies. I'm actually in our production agencies offices today. They're the guys that like need the source assets so they can take stuff apart and recreate things. So they both have, I think our agency of record kind of has a role in terms of supporting the modular content approach through production and streamlining and templates. But it's the agency of records who's sort of changing more drastically, because today they can end up kind of creating lots of their remit could be around kind of creating lots and lots of content, but it should actually be creating a lot less content. Just focus on the strategy, and help us kind of create content that can be adapted and reused. And there's a lot of opportunity actually to support more co-creation with our local teams, so we can define materials that are, so when our global teams create content, they create content that actually matters and has utility to local teams. So agencies play a big part in that process, but I do see them, we can do so much more consultation on processes and operational efficiencies, especially with our content factory. And our global teams do so much more strategic work now with our agencies. And so the focus doesn't have to be about like creating lots and lots of content, but can be more focused on, stuff that I think that's more interesting and just more rewarding for people's lives than just kind of operational things.
Speaking of operational things, let's bridge over for a couple minutes to DAM in and of itself and how the role of DAM has been evolving to support compliant content at scale in the pharma sector.
I'm kind of excited to talk about that because I think that, to me, where it really evolves to do something very different than perhaps, DAMs of old, which, still have, there's still a need to process big, rich media files, but that can't be the only thing, because we need to actually, especially from, in a life sciences perspective, as well as our files are important to us because they're our creative assets. That's what kind of, they have intellectual property. There's a cost associated to it. But what's also important to us are claims. And claims it's kind of a new thing. It's a bit of a new kid on the block when it comes to how we think about managing a claims library in relation to the content that it's used in, because claims have their own review and approval cycle. Claims need to have, they'll have sort of rules and guidance around kind of how they can be used and how they can be applied to content. So claims are actually as much of a foundation, if not more of a foundation, to our content strategy than the actual, more traditional rich media files that you would use in a DAM. Equal, if not more. Maybe more might be a little bit of a stretch, but equal to the value of the files, because they are important attributes that define our strategy, that we are able to support the approval process, because every claim we create has to be substantiated with references against kind of clinical study trials or things that ensure that saying information about a drug can be substantiated. And that's like, if we weren't able to manage our claims next to the content that they're used in, we lose the lineage of where we're using things, like which claim has been used across which content, and then is that reference the same thing all the time. So claims are such a big part of the evolution of DAM beyond just files.
And are there some specific behaviors in asset linking, in traversing joined assets within the DAM and within the larger picture of workflow that you could comment on?
That is such a key part. So I talk about modular content, and that's kind of my main project at the moment. How do we create content modules? What content modules actually are the relationships between all the attributes that make up these little building blocks. So typically a content module will be an efficacy chart and its supporting claim and some supporting text and the references that go with that. So that becomes a building block, and I can now use, if I kind of pre-approve that building block with our MLR teams, and I say the relationship between this claim, this graph, this text, and this references are kind of glued together as part of this module and pre-approved, it reduces the time. And then, so that helps to sort of, when it's used in a tactic, we can then sort of, through technology, we can, to be simplistic, we can draw boxes around where that module is being used in the final tactic. So MLR reviewers, when they're viewing the email or the interactive visual aid that's produced from that, or the website, they can see that that module's been used. They can see that they've pre-approved it before, that the business rules, which might dictate, the kind of how these things should be assembled together, have been, they have that lineage, and they can see the heritage from where that content's come from. And that's how we're going to reduce the time and approval, by giving the MLR teams more visibility to that heritage and that lineage, which we absolutely need for in order to kind of scale and do the things that we need to do.
Wow, what a nice expression of the ever-changing landscape and the boundaries of DAM. And I think it's one of the things that this field represents professionally. It has for you, it has for me. and I hope for thousands of people around the world to be able to continually explore new ways that this technology goes to work, and that the vendors who create it enable the tools and the interstitials and whatnot to make it work, to make it do better. I'll say better things, new things, innovative things, which I really like. Has it been talk a little bit, I won't make a judgmental question, but talk a little bit about how the teams are coming to know about this from a change management point of view,
Yeah.
and some of the adoption phenomena that's going on with this project.
That's the hardest part of this. I mean, we're a big company, we're like 17,000 people. How do I
Wow.
communicate this change? It's like modular content, such an abstract idea. First thing to do is like, how do we sort of explain it in a way that like people can understand what it is and what the benefits are going to be? What does it actually look like? So we did a number of, so first of all, there's a couple of things that we do in the organization which help. So I'm not on my own responsible for all the communications. And we have
Huw, what else do you have to
I
do?
know, right? That would be insane. That would be all I do. So we have, most of the work we do is in the brand team. So we have what we call engagement leads, responsible at a global and a local level in different markets. So individuals that are aligned to markets, individuals that are aligned to global brands. And I educate them so they can educate their stakeholders, which are the brand teams, to help them understands the kind of the principles of what we're achieving, which generally are pretty well understood. I mean, everyone gets the idea of, yes, of course we want to reuse content, more content. Yes, of course we want to be faster. But it's when you actually start to manifest the details of that. And one of the tactics that we use was to, we created some video. Videos are a great way to express this. So we created a sort of a deck with kind of some videos that talked about the benefits, that talked about the roadmap, which showed how all the technology would come together to deliver it. And that will really help to kind of provide clarity and also create some excitement in terms of, creating new ways of working. But, the next challenge really is when you start to get a little bit attached, because kind of nice shiny videos, which are short and punchy, are all great. But when people actually see, that you want me to like approve all of these claims now in a system, well, that sounds kind of arduous. Or you want me to sort of, approve all these things, but I hadn't had to do that before. It's not in my job description. Why should I? So you start to sort of meet sort of little pockets of resistance. So, it's a change management's a really broad word, and I think you really need to think specifically about ensuring that you create individual benefits for different stakeholders. And like we're trying to achieve with omnichannel, I don't treat everyone the same all the time. If I'm talking to local teams, I'm going to talk about what's going to benefit from them. I think you just really need to ensure that you're being very clear and passionate about, what that change is, and, and kind of how you're going to take them through it.
And I think to segue from that and to wind up our conversation, thinking ahead to the chance for you and I to sit together in April of 2024, a year from now, what are a couple of things you'd like to reflect upon as accomplishments, or that you might see as challenges that lay ahead as the next goals are met? It would be fun to be thinking about a year from now.
What I'd love to be talking about, I'd love to be talking about how we've got a sense of adoption. I mean, adoption is again, it doesn't have to mean everyone doing everything. We can put guardrails around kind of what that means. But I don't really want to be talking about, I don't want to be talking about what ModCon is anymore. I don't want to be talking about omni-channel ways of working or new ways of working. I want this just to be the new way of working. I think everyone sort of understand that, we have to change. I don't want to have to argue the reason for it. I just want it to start to be a sense of, this is the way that we do things, and it's just a case of, making continual improvement, as we move forward. So, I could be realistic as well. It's a lot to do, but some basic adoption would be nice.
Well, I have a sneaking suspicion that basic adoption may be underway. Your enthusiasm is infectious for this. Your talent is measured and known, and it's easy to see how this can succeed within those change management issues that all of us confront in large. enterprise or pan-institutional dam projects. I've so enjoyed the chance to spend the time we have these last few weeks getting ready for today, and your insights today. They're valuable for the dam community, and I will look forward to that conversation in April of 2024 and checking in on your progress. Huw, thanks for joining us today.
No problem, David. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You bet. Up next, hear from Rise Time and Omnicom Health Group in our Tech Lab session. Plus, don't forget to check out the community feed and let other attendees know that you're online. I'll be joining you in a few minutes when we talk about why is digital asset management in healthcare so hard. Thanks again to Huw Jenkins, and I'll talk to you in just a few minutes.